please like and subscribe. After he got out of the rampage at the shop, Zamina helps Vlad get out of the place. She held him up as he limps out and groans in pain. He kept his hand placed on the source of the pain, and at some point it stings him so much that he falls to his knee. Vlad just stays there sweating, trying his best to overcome the excruciating pain. The scene shifts back to a few moments prior, and we see that he's back inside the shop. Marcella bluntly tells him to get up as he curls up like an armadillo. She asks him if he wants to die, but he doesn't even respond to her. The kid just stares into space and stays silent, implying that he might not even mind dying at this point. Marcella senses this and gets so upset that she immediately slaps him hard in the face. She tells him to get his acts together and then asks him if he knows what the difference is between the guys who live in the center of the city and those who live in the slums. Vlad doesn't know the answer, so he just stares at her. Marcella tells him that the difference between them is opportunity. She explains to him that those guys in the city can get back up even if they fail once because they can afford to do it. Unfortunately for the losers in the slums like them, that isn't the case. Marcella tells Vlad to look around the wrecked shop filled with corpses of their own men. She asks him if they look like they can afford to fail, pointing out that the destruction is the result of just one failure on their part. She explains that they've been bound to a tragic fate that sentences them to death if they fail even once. Because of this, Marcella tells Vlad that he shouldn't let the chance that comes once in a lifetime slip out of his hands. Back to the present, we see that our Vlad has a new look of determination on his face. Zamina, seeing that he's in pain, asks if he's okay and suggests that she should slow down to make it easier for him. However, Vlad refuses and insists that they have to keep moving. He refuses to allow himself to end things there. He wipes the beads of sweat on his face and prepares to get back to his feet with Zamina's help. Unfortunately, that's about the same time when one of their enemies spots them. He immediately alerts the others, revealing that he's found George's little minion who they've been looking for. Vlad begins to run for his life, although he was limping just a few seconds ago. Zamina runs as well, and Vlad pulls her to ensure that he doesn't leave her behind. He urges her to run as fast as she can while the enemies pursue them with their swords. Even if they are just two little birds, it is time for them to fly into the sky on their own, because their nest is no longer there. They both manage to escape from their pursuers, leaving them confused. The killers with swords turn in circles, trying to figure out which way the kids went, but their efforts are fueled by frustration. One of them curses the kids, calling them little rats, while another suggests that they escaped into another alleyway. In the commotion, the leader of the gang suddenly orders the goons to inspect every corner, promising to reward them handsomely if they find the kids. The gang leader's face is revealed, and then we see that it's the ponytail guy who Vlad humiliated back at the shop when Moneybug first arrived. It turns out his little encounter with our hero cost him a few teeth, and because of that, he desperately wants to get his revenge. Hearing that they would be rewarded, the men are re-motivated to keep searching. They decide to split up, believing that Vlad and Zamina couldn't have gone too far. Unfortunately for them, in their haste, they run past the door where the kids are hiding behind. They don't even notice that it isn't locked, while Vlad and Zamina are hiding quietly behind it. Vlad is holding his dagger while Zamina is covering her mouth with her hands so her muffled cries don't give their position away. Vlad listens closely as the men run past and continue searching. He tells Zamina to go outside and escape once things get quieter, as you'd expect. She's worried about him and asks him what he would do. Vlad explains that. He needs to get out of there somehow and points out that it would be dangerous for them to move together since their pursuers are close by. However, Zamina doesn't think they should split up at all. She refuses the idea and tells Vlad that she wants to stay with him, reminding him of the promise he made to Marcella before they set out on a flight and vowing that he would take Zamina to a safe location before leaving her alone. He just tells her that she should go to the convent before sunrise, and if she's not okay with that, he also suggests that she can go to Harbin. However, Zamina didn't want to go. This triggered Vlad, and he reproached her for not truly listening. Frustrated, he called her a fool and questioned whether she believed he could protect her in his current condition. Zamina, on the verge of tears, continued to try to voice her protest. Suddenly, they heard a voice asking, "Who's there?" Zamina quickly seized a nearby knife and raised it towards the man whose face was hidden in the shadows. The old man was the blacksmith. He asked why they are here, but Zamina reacted aggressively, demanding that the old man not to make any movements. The old man thought she was silly for saying that when they're the ones intruding. Zamina issued a threat warning that she would stab him if he made any moves. The old man fixed his gaze upon her. Both Vlad and Zamina stared back at him, and tears began to well up in Zamina's eyes. The old man expressed his understanding of their situation and requested that Zamina lower her weapon. She demanded that the old man hand over the sword. The old man asked her what she was talking about. She clarified that she was referring to the sword hung up in the shop and demanded that he give it to her. Vlad, immediately alarmed by Zamina's behavior, and urged her to put down the knife, but Zamina simply yelled for the sword to be brought to her. The old man realized how this is normal in the slums. The true nature of the people there is to take something from others for survival. The old man saw himself in her as he was in the same predicament before, and this time it's his turn to experience that. The old man only answered that he was sad for her. This triggered Zamina's and gritted her teeth and moved her knife. Vlad called out to her to stop her. The old man just shut his eyes, preparing for the knife to go through. The knife cut through something. Vlad was surprised to see it. Zamina cut off her own hair using the knife. She did not intend to stab the old man. Instead, she offered her hair and told the man that what she's offering may not be enough, and promised to pay him back later. She cried and begged for the sword to be given to Vlad. The old man stared at her as her hair slowly fell to the ground. The man looked at the pool of hair in the ground and turned his attention to Vlad, asking him if he's leaving. Vlad answered yes and confirmed it to be the case. He rubbed his forehead as he told them how they made things difficult for him. He instructed them to follow him on a snowy night. A wagon is being laboriously pushed beneath the night sky as snow falls. The old man is seen pulling a wagon. The person behind the wagon complained about the foul odor, but the old man encouraged him to persevere, stating that this was their only means of transportation. Out of nowhere, someone called out to the old man, startling him. 3 armed men suddenly appeared and questioned the old man about what he was doing. In the middle of the night, he recognized the men and was surprised to find them in the same location. One of the men attempted to peer into the wagon and skeptically inquired whether he was disposing of trash at such a late hour. In an attempt to cover up the situation, the old man feigned anger and scolded them for obstructing the alleyway due to the brawls they had incited. This further explained how his shop was now overwhelmed with trash he couldn't dispose of. The man was on the verge of voicing his complaints about the old man's personality, but then he noticed the person in the robe. He inquired of the old man about the identity of the person in the robe, as he had assumed that the old man worked alone. The old man, with frustration in his voice, explained that he had grown weary of handling the task alone. So he had enlisted the person in the robe to assist him. He challenged the 3 men, asking if they wanted to take over the duty of pushing the wagon. Instead, the man approached the person in the robe and assured the old man that he was fine, but he needed to inspect the other individual. He took a stance as though he were ready to draw a sword. He pointed the blade at the person in the robe, and the tip of the blade pierced through the inside of the hood. He issued a menacing threat to the person in the robe, warning them not to make a move. Unless they wanted to be cats, the man sliced the robe to reveal the person's face. He was taken aback by what he saw. The individual beneath the hood with red hair, contorted their face into an unattractive expression, squinting their eyes and perspiring. The man pulled a comical, bewildered, and disgusted expression and could only manage a response. The old man asked what he was looking for, and the guy admitted that it was George's this blonde kid that they're after since they couldn't find his body. The old man clicked his tongue and asked if they could go, but the man wanted to be certain, so he instructed the men with him to check the wagon. Vlad was actually hiding beneath all the trash. Zamina and the old man both had an alarmed expression. The man was instructed to do the inspection somewhere, so he referred them to one of his colleagues. The old man wondered if their decision to go to that place was a mistake. As he made his move towards the other man, he realized they had no other choice but to proceed to this place. Despite the anger, the man checked the wagon and commented on how there's a lot of trash in it. Something caught his attention. He stared at it while Zamina watched him. Zamina looked down and put her lip on, and the man stayed silent. He told her not to hate him since he's just doing his job. And all of a sudden, he strongly poked the contents of the wagon with a stick. Zamina covered her eyes as tears started. While the old man clenched his teeth, the men continued poking through the pile of trash inside the wagon. He then talked to them about Harvin putting a boat on the river. They were shocked and confused to hear this. He explained that everyone went to that place to see the reason behind that act. The stick stayed in front of Vlad's face, while the man continued to talk, and the man told them to keep in mind what he said. He then pulled out the stick and declared pass. The old man walked past the man, and without looking at them, the inspector told them that it was his payment for the 40 silver that his little brother owed him. Vlad wore a sullen expression and uttered thanks. The old man and Zamina stood there looking at the passage. Then the old man explained that the trash there goes outside the city. Zamina, in tears, bid Vlad goodbye and told him to be well. They dumped the contents of the wagon inside, and along with it, Vlad fell while he gripped his sword tightly. The old man watched him. The star that this boy held in his hand was something the old man made with his dreams and was bought with the girl's tears. Zamina continued crying under the full moon as the night sky enveloped the mountains. A sword gleamed with a fiery reflection. Vlad is holding his sword with the blade facing up. He's looking at it and asking, "Can you hear me?" The voice in his mind answered yes. He asked who he was, but the voice answered that he didn't know. Vlad remarked on the irony of the voice, having so much to say about swords, all the while not truly comprehending them himself. Vlad continued by stating that perhaps it's for the best that he offered his assistance, and in return, the voice should aid him. Vlad pledged to help the voice regain its memories and requested that it serve as his sword in return for a resolute gaze. He recalled the night when he last saw Godwin and revealed that what he was truly afraid of was becoming nothing. With this kind of strong determination, the silhouette of a mysterious swordmaster appeared. He was the owner of the voice, and with that the sword agreed to tell Vlad about his swordsmanship. It was a clear, sunny day on a snowy mountain where the troops had established their base camp. A banner of blue with a yellow emblem in the center stood at the campsite. A marker piece was placed on a map, and a hand was seen nearby, indicating a location or making a move. The hand belonged to a man with black hair who appeared to be deep in thought, and he commented that it's too easy. This man was Joseph Bayezid, the second son of the Bayezid family. With a frustrated expression, repeated, "It's too easy." He was pulled from his thoughts when a knight appeared to notify him of his arrival. Jose had specific knowledge the night Joseph called the knight's name, which was Jagger. The knight stood proudly with black hair and a black eye patch covering one of his eyes. Jagger noticed that something was bothering Joseph, so he inquired about it. Joseph explained that he's bothered by how easy it was. Jagger reported that the monster subjugation was going well, and they had a low count of casualties. Among the mercenaries, Joseph asked if deserters were considered irrelevant, missing individuals. He rubbed his jaw as he continued to ponder the outcome. without any variabilities or deserters. He was worried that everyone would doubt his ability to command. With an intense gaze, he declared that his father and the vassals were a given. It also goes the same for his half-brother Rudiger. Jagger remained silent. Joseph appeared unsatisfied, thinking that if the current situation continued, it could lead to a disaster. He also pondered the obvious intentions of Rudiger if he failed to become the next count. The Bayezid family was known for its reverence of the military, as evidenced by their history. Joseph's father and his blood-related brothers had vied fiercely with each other to secure the position of count. Joseph commented on how he lacked swordsmen since he only had Jaggers. Jagger called Joseph a young master and told him that he had more to report. Joseph allowed him to speak about it. Jagger informed Joseph about a suspicious soldier. Joseph asked if that's a spy sent by his brother. Jagger clarified that it's not the reason why he is suspicious. I told him that he should see it for himself to understand it. A goblin bleeding through the cut in its body. Joseph covered his nose with his handkerchief and remarked how dreadful it was that there were 2 goblins hanging by its hands with cuts in their bodies. Joseph speculated that it could be done by a child who just started wielding a sword. Jagger has something else to show Joseph. Walked through a row of injured zombies, and Joseph commented on how the cuts were done poorly. He's starting to get irritated by seeing the same thing. He stopped on one goblin as he noticed that it was better than the previous ones. He continued observing and found another one that's better. He realized that the markings on the goblins' bodies are the same yet different. He asked Jagger if it was done by the same person. He went to clarify by saying all of these. Jagger confirmed and explained that what's in front of them were the ones that came yesterday, and the previous ones were done on the goblins last month. Joseph was shocked to hear that. He looked at the goblin in front of him and thought how impossible it is to make such progress in just 1 month. On a clear day in the middle of the snow-covered forest, blood splashed against the pristine white backdrop, and the goblins sustained severe injuries from the slashes of the swords. Blood spilled everywhere as the goblins fought with armed men. A man with a sword and shield commanded his comrades to tighten their formation so that the goblins wouldn't be able to escape. A blood-covered spear is pointed towards the head of the fallen goblin. As the man narrates how he can finally end this, he arrogantly orders his colleagues to go get the rest of the goblins. The armed men seem to be disturbed by the scene in front of them. A massive goblin, taller than a human with menacing red eyes, lurked behind an oblivious man poised to strike him with a weapon. He wondered why his colleagues were gazing at him in such a peculiar manner. All of a sudden, the goblin struck with tremendous force. It was powerful enough to create an explosion, which made the onlookers cover their eyes from the flying debris and blinding light. The massive goblin had successfully crushed this one, making the man's body hit the snow-covered ground and paint it with blood. All those who had witnessed this are now enveloped in fear. The men stood frozen as they watched the massive goblin charge towards them in an instant. The enraged goblin had attacked multiple people. The others were bewildered as to where this goblin had come from. One person informed the group that it had broken through the formation of Group 5 and recommended they retreat. They hastily ran away from the advancing goblin as they fled. Keeping a watchful eye on their pursuer, a man on horseback appeared atop a nearby cliff. The man on horseback scolded those who were attempting to flee and ordered them to move forward. Instead of retreating, warning that they wouldn't receive compensation if they didn't comply, the men talked back, stating that they hadn't been informed about the presence of hobgoblins, and they complained that if that were the case, expensive mercenaries should have been hired instead of them. They even went so far as to suggest that the man on the horse should take on the fighting himself in response to their defiance. The man on the horse unsheathed his sword, casting curses upon those who had spoken out against him. Before he could fully unsheath his sword, a body landed beside him, leaving him in a state of shock. Even the horse appeared stunned. The goblin appeared utterly terrifying as it ruthlessly defeated all of the people. The man on the horse watched the horrifying scene unfold, and a bead of sweat trickled down his face. In that instant, he came to the realization that he couldn't handle this situation, and the horse snorted at him in apparent disapproval. A man walked towards the scene. The individual had golden hair and a sword at his side. The man intentionally approached the hobgoblin, leaving people wondering about his identity. It was Vlad, who was prepared to draw a sword. The crowd cheered and hailed him as the praying Ramon, with a determined and intense gaze, declared that he would take on the hobgoblin. He made a swift and determined charge toward the hobgoblin. The hobgoblin took notice of him and swiftly turned. Vlad maintained a focused and unwavering gaze. His swords were sliced on the side part of the torso of the goblin. The goblin groaned in pain, but Vlad soon realized that the cut was only shallow. The voice urged him to dodge as the enraged goblin launched an attack toward him. He hastily retreated but swiftly turned around to face the goblin. He turned in the direction of the goblin to see if his counterattack had been successful. He first felt frustration as he realized that he had failed once more. The voice in his mind scolded him, saying he's stupid for not being able to do it after several instructions to him. He pouted as he retorted that only a genius can do it, right after being told to do so. As the hobgoblin charged towards him, he decided to take the longer route to defeat his opponent. The hobgoblin emitted a deafening roar as it prepared itself for another attack. The goblin's strike was powerful, but thanks to his agility, Vlad managed to evade it. The hobgoblins swiftly launched another attack, and yet another attack followed. Vlad calmly evaded each successive attack. This infuriated the hobgoblin to the point where it gritted its teeth in frustration. The hobgoblin gripped its weapon with both hands, raising it high in preparation for a powerful strike against Vlad, who stood before it. The attack was so formidable that it triggered an enormous eruption, shrouding the entire scene in a cloud of smoke. As the smoke gradually dissipated, the hobgoblin came into view, poised at the end of its weapon. Vlad was nowhere to be found, leaving only a cracked and battered ground in his absence. Vlad vowed that this time he'd definitely cut it. The hobgoblin's expression turned to one of terror as it comprehended the impending doom that awaited it. Vlad was on the verge of swinging his sword behind the hobgoblin. He unleashed his attack with a mighty swing of a sword, and he was introduced as Ryman Joseph, and Jagger talked about the guy called the Praying. Ryman Joseph asked Jagger to immediately investigate that person. Jagger obediently accepted the order from his young master. Joseph continued to think about how things didn't make any sense. He looked at the goblin's body and noticed how crooked and sloppy the swings were, and yet that person was able to walk down the path of the sword in just a month. Joseph, feeling amused, let out a small smile. The goblin's body was split in half and blood-soaked. The men filled the wagon with the lifeless forms of goblins from the battleground. One of them remarked about the remaining worthless remnants. Given the presence of a hobgoblin, they had hoped for something more valuable. One man exclaimed as he praised his captain for doing well in the battle. The man engaged in conversation with Rama, who curtly told him to cease the chit-chat and load all the deceased bodies he had dispatched. The man responded that he had already done so and playfully inquired who would dare touch what belonged to him. The man asked Ryman what he would be doing next, now that he had completed the task. He went a step further and extended an invitation for Ryman to collaborate on some other work with him. He even tried to justify how their teamwork would work, but Rayman was already walking away while telling him that he doesn't work with fraud. This made the man's mood sour. He walked towards Ryman as he mentioned a mercenary plaque. He arrogantly told him that Rayman couldn't keep using it. He then offered that he knew someone who's really good at forging, but Raymond cut him off mid-sentence by calling his name Guth. With a stern and intimidating expression, Riemann warned him that he should be aware that idle chatter could lead to people meeting their demise. Riemann had already planned that if Goethe is just suggesting, he will end it with a warning, but if it's a threat, he will kill him. Goethe was overcome with fear, and this fear was clearly evident on his face. He tried to get on the good side of Riemann by saying that he was just suggesting, since he's concerned that rhyme only earns change when he's quite skilled. This irritation frustrated Riemann, and he sternly instructed Goethe to be quiet and resume the cleaning task, warning that failure to comply would result in a parting of ways with his own head. This made him turn and go away. Riemann realized that he needed to do something about Goethe. In time, he started walking away from the battle area where the men were loading up the wagon with the dead bodies. Those who noticed him walking away gossiped with each other, wondering if Riemann would pray again. One man commented on how consistent Roman is when it came to praying in the midst of the woods. Roman kneeled on one knee, his sword supporting him, and he bowed his head. The people who saw him commented on how he looked cool and speculated about his noble origins. They couldn't imagine Riemann being born as a low-class person maintaining that posture. In reality, Riemann grumbled about how he had been unable to dispatch the hot goblin with a single strike. He wasn't actually praying. He's talking to the voice. The voice answered back that the principle of one hit, one kill lies in the element of surprise. Riemann asked what that even means, and the voice's explanation goes like this. When you raise your sword, the opponent goes whoosh. That's when you wham. Riemann looked so unconvinced with the explanation and asked if he's supposed to understand that the voice asked him why he doesn't understand going wham when they whoosh. Riemann was confused, but he wanted to believe the whoosh. As he muttered, whoosh, whoosh, unbeknownst to him, the people behind him intently prayed. Back at the campsite, an unappetizing bowl of soup was placed before the diner. Riemann examined a spoonful of the soup, his expression filled with doubt, as he wondered what kind of meat might be in it. Goethe answered him that he doesn't know what meat it is, but since it was given for free, he didn't bother to care. Riemann was having a meal with his crew, and he continued explaining how difficult it is to find a place where the employer provides meals. Another person commented on how that proves that the employer really obeys. Another one commented that the food is a little salty, but still better than nothing. Riemann told the crew to enjoy the meal and left the table. They wondered if Riemann was going to go see the priest again. One of them even started considering praying as well. Another person retorted that even if he prayed, he's never going to be like Riemann. A blue tent with a banner of a cross stood in the base camp, and the priest welcomed Riemann. Andreas appeared delighted to share the news that he had heard Riemann was praying even last night, despite the harsh cold weather. Riemann politely answered that he wouldn't feel cold when he's in the embrace of God, but at the back of his mind, he cursed the whoosh. It seemed like he was practicing it. This made Father Andres laugh heartily, while commenting how Roman was more like a priest than himself. A small boy told Father Andreas that the meal was ready. Father Andres expressed his gratitude to the boy. Father Andres invited Riemann for breakfast. He urged him to sit, even though Riemann expressed that he didn't come there to eat. Father Andreas initiated praying so they could start their meal with their hands in a prayer position. Father Andres recited the prayer. Ramon kept his eyes open while Jean had his eyes closed. Father Andres discreetly opened one eye to peek at Riemann. In Father Andreas' eyes, Riemann appeared to be praying with deep devotion, leading Father Andreas to admire this faithful believer who remained unwavering in his faith even in such humble surroundings. With that determination, Father Andres made it his mission to guide the young man who would forever have blood on his hands due to his involvement in battles. Father Andreas believed that this fate was preordained by God. They completed the prayer, and Father Andres urged Roman to partake in the meal, or Iman politely accepted and expressed his gratitude. Deep down, Riemann was secretly excited about the meal set before him. It consisted of a rare treat, wheat bread, and soup this to him was what real food tasted like as he was about to take a bite of the bread. Father Andres opened up a conversation about his swordsmanship. He informed him that he had heard about his skill, and the news had already traveled to Joseph. Because of that, Jagger visited the priest to ask about Roman. Confused on what the priest meant, Roman only answered, and then, with a joyous expression, Father Andres proudly stated that he had made the recommendation for Raman. He even mentioned how he's looking forward to how Roman will grow up. Father Andres explained that the Bayezid family is a renowned family in the north, and being able to work for them will grant him a better environment. Father Andres assured him that he had the right to access that. In the middle of the woods, someone commented that the situation is not good. It was Ramon. They assumed his prayer position in the middle of the woods as he spoke to the voice in his head. He commented on how conspicuous he was. The voice answered that they don't really have a choice, since the swordsmanship can only be learned through experience. The voice speculated that the bigger issue could be being close to the priest. Ramon answered that he had to check about that. The voice asked if Ryman is already convinced that the voice is not evil. The priest was said to have great divine power enough to be offered the bishop title and didn't notice anything odd about the voice, and the sword Raymond is now convinced. Ryman asked if it's better to just run away, but the voice suggested that maybe people will turn a blind eye to his fake identity since he's quite skilled. Worry washed over Ryman's face as he contemplated the possibility of being discovered for killing a mercenary who had been stealing, and he feared that this would lead to charges of both identity fraud and murder. The voice answered, "You're quite the evil man," and Ramon retorted that the voice is an accomplice. The voice had suggested that it was better to run since a self-defense claim can only be valid when there's a witness. Oh, with that, Ryman had decided to run away. All of a sudden, the voice told him that it would be difficult. This left Riemann confused. The voice warned him that someone was approaching and that person was an advanced knight. Riemann swiftly turned and prepared himself to launch an attack. The knight who was approaching was Jagger. Ryman maintained his stance while Jagger observed him and wondered if Riemann felt his presence. This proved that Riemann was better than he anticipated. Jagger calmly informed Dryman that Joseph wanted to see him. Riemann appeared composed as he replied, "It's an honor." But in his thoughts, he was determined to maintain a poker face. Jagger asked if Riemann knew that he was coming, and Riemann explained that he already heard from Father Andreas, although he didn't expect him to approach him so soon as Jagger continued. To observe Riemann, he was impressed by how a young individual like him didn't appear to be intimidated by Jagger's presence. He instructed Riemann to follow him. Riemann watched as Jagger's back receded into the distance. Riemann contemplated if he should run away now, but the voice stopped him, since a knight of that caliber can take him down before he can even take 3 steps. Riemann sheathed his sword while contemplating that he had no other options left. Joseph's tent came into view. Joseph was engrossed in a blue book as he conversed. With Riemann expressing that it was a pleasure to meet him, Riemann bowed respectfully, saying, "It's an honor," still absorbed in the book. Joseph inquired if Riemann had encountered any difficulties at work. Ramon replied, "Everyone is thankful for Sir Joseph's consideration." Joseph expressed that he thought Riemann was the son of a fallen noble family because of his blonde hair and blue eyes that remained in his bowing position. Joseph inquired, "Is your name Riemann?" To which Riemann responded, "Yes, sir." Joseph closed the book and commented, "I should have said this earlier." Suddenly, Jagger landed a powerful strike on Riemann's face out of the blue with a bruised cheek. Riemann's eyes glared intensely as he fixed his gaze on Jagger. Even with only one eye, Jagger appeared menacing and ruthless. Joseph spoke to him, saying how he abhors liars and called him Vlad of Sora. While wiping his cheek, he replied, "I see you already knew about it." Joseph sat down to share what he found out, that his mother had been an unmarried woman, and there was no information available about his father. Joseph asked Vlad if he knew who his father was, with an intense and somewhat arrogant gaze. Vlad countered by noting the irony in Joseph's question given the context of being the son of an unmarried woman. Instantaneously, Jagger delivered a swift strike to Vlad. Vlad let out a groan as he landed on one of his knees. Jagger glared at Vlad, serving as a reminder to mind his manners. Vlad returned the same intense gaze, refusing to back down. Joseph walks towards Vlad while telling him that there's no need for manners, because that would have been funny. He told him that they had already found out why he ran away from Sawara with an intimidating look. Jagger questioned Vlad about where he had learned to wield a sword. Vlad stayed silent, maintaining his intense gaze directed at Joseph. Joseph, with a hint of annoyance, remarked on how Vlad's eyes seemed to conceal much more than they revealed, having fallen to his knees. Vlad remained on the floor, and he sensed Jagger's presence behind him. Jagger's sword was partially unsheathed, poised to end him at any moment, feeling cornered. Vlad bit his lip with a stern expression, and he began to explain that he had a teacher who had arrived and disappeared as swiftly as a bolt of lightning. Joseph was taken aback by this revelation. Vlad continued to explain how his teacher concealed his name. He shared that his teacher had told him that the greatest secret to success was never to be revealed to anyone. He spoke with firm resolve in his eyes. Joseph had observed Vlad's unwavering gaze. He accepted his answer and apologized for the rough treatment. Vlad maintained his firm gaze, but a bead of sweat trickled down his face. He wondered if his explanation had been convincing. Joseph informed him that he was in a difficult situation and had a proposal to make to Vlad. He asked Vlad from Sawara if he had ever aspired to attain a higher position. He clarified that he meant things like freedom, power, or knighthood. Vlad was left in shock, his mouth hanging open. Joseph declared that he would support Vlad. With Vlad on one knee and looking up at him, it appeared as if a knight was pledging loyalty to his master. The wooden swords clashed together in a practice or training session. The clash of the wooden swords was between Jagger and Vlad. The onlookers wondered how he's holding out, but one person commented that Jagger is obviously going easy on Vlad. They wondered if Vlad was going to be Jagger's disciple. The people noticed how he's exceptionally skilled. One person commented on Vlad's lock, expressing that he was bound to have a promising future. Vlad appeared to be having a difficult time evading the attacks. Jagger chastised him, deeming Vlad an arrogant kid for displaying such confidence in front of Sir Joseph with his limited skills. Jagger held his ground, brandishing his sword, and told Vlad he was just a youngster who didn't understand his position. Vlad recognized that Jagger operated on a different level. Every time Jagger dodged an attack, another one followed instantly, and it was too powerful to block. Jagger calmly swung a sword while Vlad pondered ways to alleviate his predicament. The sword was aimed at Vlad's shoulder, but Vlad managed to block it. Afterward, he prepared to swing his sword over his head using both hands. He positioned himself to generate more power for the sword. He effectively blocked Jagger's sword directly in front of him. The crowd rejoiced at his progress, and they couldn't help but be amazed. Jagger complimented him, saying he was doing well to manage that feat under the circumstances. Vlad gasped for breath, realizing that he hadn't truly succeeded. He knew that Jagger had allowed him to land a blow. Jagger instructed him to spar like that twice a day in the morning and during the evening. Vlad was surprised to hear that Jagger concluded the morning sparring match and advised him not to cool down too much. Vlad watched as Jagger walked away. Vlad whispered about Jagger's non-committal nature, noting how he hadn't left a piece of advice. The voice commented on the remarkable swordsmanship of Jagger. The voice elaborated on how Jagger ruthlessly eliminated Vlad's superfluous movements, emphasizing that getting hit was a crucial part of the learning process. Vlad rubbed his head, sulking that no one was taking him aside outside of Joseph's tent. You could hear him asking Jagger about his thoughts on Vlad after their sparring match. Jagger reported that Vlad can be useful. He added the remark that if Vlad were a noble, he would surely catch the Count's eye. Joseph seemed happy with his judgments being right. Jagger raised an issue about the kid, saying that he is too arrogant to know his rightful place. This one told him that is to be expected from him since he grew up in the back alley. But etiquette can be taught well if done slowly, and Joseph hinted that he has the right man in front of him to do the job. Jagger remained silent. Jagger emphasized that a loyal sword cannot be trusted. Joseph shared that Vlad's act of bowing his head when he saw him wouldn't earn his trust, and that it would be better for Vlad to demonstrate his true intentions from within. He vividly remembered the penetrating gaze and Vlad's unwavering declaration that he had a mission to fulfill regardless of the circumstances. Joseph commented that it's for the best if a relationship where both parties have something to desire from each other is more preferable. Jagger bowed and showed respect for Joseph's perspective. Joseph also observed that Vlad wasn't quite the wolf, and yet he characterized Vlad as exhibiting arrogance, a lack of trustworthiness, and a considerable degree of self-importance. He advised Jagger not to rush, emphasizing the need for time to construct a big cage with a sinister smile. Joseph elaborated that it should be a colossal cage. Forrest Goeth shivered as he lamented the cold and fog of winter. Speaking to himself now that Vlad was serving Jagger, he regretted not befriending Vlad earlier. He dismissed the thought, asserting that while it's good to have connections, what's even better is finding a way to leave the expedition team in such inclement weather. All of a sudden, someone asked him if anything happened. It was Roderick, and he reported to him that nothing was out of the ordinary. Roderick reminded him to do his job properly. He bowed his head and answered with enthusiasm, telling Roderick not to worry about them. That was all a show. Once Roderick turned his back, his gaze turned dark. He commented on how Roderick was so stuck up, and since he had just patrolled, he wouldn't come by for a while. He took this chance to sleep for a moment while standing. He was in a deep slumber. He was roused from sleep by a voice asking what he was doing there, and he suddenly realized that Roderick hadn't departed yet. He heard Roderick speak again. This time, Roderick asked his conversation partner why they were looking for a kid. This may have been Gothic curiosity about who he was talking to. Roderick commented that his conversation partner is a crazy woman, and he clarified that he is not her kid. He became curious about what he had heard, and he wondered why the conversation suddenly came to a halt. He became cautious as he attempted to discern who was there. He discreetly moved closer to get a better look. He saw Roderick's back covered in black smoke. What he saw next left him both stunned and filled with fearful. He saw a skull-faced entity lurking at the side of Roderick's specter. It had hollow eye sockets, a gaping maw, and a long, eerie tongue. It had no physical form, just a mist-like presence.